Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Daily Global COVID-19 Show. Today is episode 235 in 235 days. And we on this show talk about various aspects of the pandemic as well as the upcoming US elections. We also talk about issues like creativity in the middle of the pandemic. And we'll get to do that today with our very special guest, Jerry Kraft. He's a New York Times bestselling and Newbery medal-winning author, illustrator of the graphic novel New Kid. His companion graphic novel, Class Act, was published this month. He's the creator of Mama's Boys, an award-winning comic strip which was a 5-time winner of the African American Literary Award, co-founder of the Schomburg Center's annual Black Comic Book Festival. You'll get to meet Jerry in just a minute. He'll be doing some live drawing during the show, so please make sure you let your friends, and especially if you have any kids in your lives who would enjoy that, please tell them to join us as well. We're watching live, and you can also join us later. Let me first say hi to everybody. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. And I'm also the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, let us help you plan your virtual events. We've done events for 50 people and for 100,000 people. We bet your event is somewhere between those two numbers. We are live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Please tag your friends right now so that they can watch now or later. We're usually on at 9 p.m. Eastern, but on Saturday mornings, we do this much earlier so that our producers and all of you can get time to be with friends and family instead of watching this show. Let's tell you a little bit about the show if you haven't seen it before. In our first 230 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 156 million social impressions. We've had 420 guests from 71 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. Our archives are on youtube.com/Sreenet, and we're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. Please check them out and please follow them as well. We mentioned our producers before, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow both of them on social media as well. We're also able to do this because of our sponsors, and we're very grateful to them. So please tag your friends, please hit share, please hit retweet. Jerry's on Twitter at Jerry Kraft, and you can find all of this on my social media channels, and please connect with me on Twitter at Sree. So are you now ready for some creativity, for some energy early on a Saturday morning? Our guest is Jerry Kraft, New York Times bestselling and Newbery medal-winning author and illustrator of the graphic novels New Kid and Class Act. Class Act was just published. He's a co-founder of the Schomburg Center's annual Black Comic Book Festival. So please welcome on our show, Jerry Kraft. Hi, Jerry.
Hey, Sree. How are you?
I'm actually, very nervous about the elections and feeling very, in some ways I want Tuesday to come now. I want it to be Tuesday night, and then I don't want it to be Tuesday night. But because I have you on the show, I wore my most colorful shirt, even though my inside I'm not feeling so buoyant and upbeat. I know talking to you is going to turn me buoyant and upbeat. So that's why I'm wearing this shirt. Thank you very much for being here. My first question to all our guests, how are you? Where are you? And how is your family and loved ones? How are they handling the pandemic?
So I am in Connecticut, and it's as well as can be expected. My oldest son graduated from college in the spring, but of course there was no graduation ceremony. So that kind of big graduation ceremony, first, oldest kid graduating and walking cap and gown and all that stuff never happened. But he was fine. He basically said that was more for me and his mother than it was for him. So he was fine. got his first job and is working from home, which what a time to do it. It's like amazing that the jobs that I had, my first job, I couldn't have worked from home. There was no such thing as working from home back then. But he just has not missed a beat. And my youngest is in his third year of college, and he is socially distancing on campus. Actually has an apartment off campus. So, we're doing as well as can be expected.
Yeah, I have 17-year-old twins who turned 17 in the middle of the pandemic. And I've been saying this is no way to turn 17 with your parents in lockdown in Manhattan. So let's talk about your amazing work as an author, illustrator. You've said kindly that you'll do some live drawing. So we're excited about that as well. Let's hear a little bit about your story, and then we'll talk about the specific books. So let's start with your background and the amazing success you've had with both Class Act and New Kid. But let's get a little bit of the backstory first.
Got it. So in the book New Kid, it's loosely based on my life. So I was born in Harlem. I grew up in Washington Heights, and I have always loved to draw. I have been drawing since I was old enough to hold a pencil or crayon and know not to, put up my nose or anything like that. I'll actually show you a picture of some of a drawing that I did when I was back in, this is like 7th grade. This is actual homework, and Spanish homework. And I used to love getting back any paper that had like this much blank paper, because I would take out my pen and pencil, nothing fancy, and just start drawing my favorite thing in the whole world, which is superheroes. I was a comic book fan. I wasn't a reader, which surprises a lot of people. I mean, I love comic books, Marvel comics. So I always loved to draw. Didn't always love to read, not till I was almost an adult. And then I went to primarily African-American schools, small schools. I wanted to go to art school. My parents would not let me go to art school. So they sent me to a school in the Riverdale section of New York, where now I was one of the few kids of color in that school. And by the time it was time to choose a college, I went to School of Visual Arts. So I did finally get to go to art school, and have had various jobs since then, all pretty creative jobs, working at places like King Features and Sports Illustrated for Kids. And I have been doing children's books exclusively since 2007. So 13 years of just being home, working in the studio as the dogs nudge my elbows while I'm trying to draw. And that's kind of brings you up to right now.
And along the way, I'm sure there must have been moments where the family was like, wait, why are you wasting your time with that doodling and all of that? Many of us, when we were kids, wanted to draw superheroes, liked to doodle, had dreams of doing that. You actually got to live your dream, which is amazing.
Yeah. No, it was a kind of a tough journey, because when I was growing up, I think one of the reasons why I was into comics and not, so-called real books, was because I didn't see a lot of mirrors in those books, specifically African-American boys, because a lot of the books that had any kind of African-American characters when I was younger were kind of like three things: slavery, civil rights, and maybe gangs or something like that. And that wasn't my life at all. So I couldn't empathize at all. So they weren't books that I really related to. So I felt more of a bond with Peter Parker and Spider-Man than I did with, any of the quote unquote classic characters. So I've just always wanted to see the characters that I wish would have turned me into a reader when I was a kid.
Thank you. We're looking at jerrycraft.com. What can people find here on the site?
So it will have a lot of info on both books, New Kid and the companion book, which just came out on October 6th. So just a few weeks ago. I have some videos, some interviews, how to book me for Zooms and school visits, some celebrity photos with pals that I've met over the years. Yeah, it's a bunch of stuff. So there's Jacqueline Woodson. There's a little video I did with for her for JetBlue, which is kind of a nice thing. I had a friend of mine who was going on vacation, and they showed those on the little screens on all the JetBlue flights. So he was on the plane, and all of a sudden he sees my face. He's like, "Hey, that's my friend." So I got a lot of stuff. Even some of my my son's friends were like going on vacation during spring break. They're like, "Dude, was that your dad on the screen on the plane?" So that was pretty cool.
Well, we've got to talk about the Coretta Scott King Award acceptance speech. So talk about the award, please.
So that was something that was a surprise. So the American Library Association, ALA, every year has their awards, and they have the Newbery Medal and the Newbery Honors, and then they have the Coretta Scott King Author Award and Honors. And it was interesting because a lot of schools do mock Newberys, where the kids pick their favorite books and try to guess what will win that prestigious prize. And so I had seen New Kid a lot in those mock Newberys, but I had never seen New Kid mentioned with the Coretta Scott King Award. So that was very interesting. And it was like, I think January 27th, 7 o'clock in the morning, I got a call. It's like, hello. And it's like, hey, this is, the Coretta Scott King Awards Committee letting you know that you have won the 2020 Coretta Scott King Author Award. And I was shocked by that. And yeah. And then about 20 minutes prior, I had gotten the call that I had won the Newbery Medal, which was stunning. I actually have it here that I will show you that it is an actual medal.
Nice.
Yeah. So that is the actual medal. And New Kid is the first graphic novel in its 100-year history to ever win the award. And it is also, by winning that and the Coretta Scott King Author Award, it's the second book ever joining Bud Not Buddy to win both awards. And I'm only the fifth African-American author in its 98-year history to win this medal. So it was quite the morning to wake up to both of those phone calls.
That's incredible. We hear about the phone calls that Nobel laureates get for chemistry and physics and all of that, and this is the equivalent moment for you. I have seen hundreds of books with the medal on it, but first time I'm actually seeing the medal, and it just, there you go. Number one New York Times #1 best-selling book, New Kid, and the newer book is called Class Act. New Kid was the first book. Mm-hmm. And so tell us about the audience that you aim your books at, and how did you decide this is who you're going to be writing for?
I wanted to aim pretty broad because, I feel in a lot of ways that I'm still kind of a big kid with the stuff that I watch. I'm still first online to see an Avengers movie or, a Star Wars movie, that kind of thing. So my kids never missed any of those. I was the dad that at 3:01, I was outside going, come on, we got tickets for 3:45. Let's go. And so that was kind of interesting. But, I've always loved to do that. So that's kind of my thing is like I just love to be creative and have fun. So even when my sons were younger, if I would take them to see a movie like Shrek, that was great because they'd be laughing hysterically at some parts, and then I'd be laughing hysterically at other parts that they didn't get. So when I was doing New Kid and Class Act, I wanted to aim really broad. I wanted it to be in the sense where for African American kids who had never really seen a different slice of life other than that, gang, slavery, civil rights kind of thing. And again, those are important books, but I think that it's also important, any book that a kid hugs, and, you're like, okay, it's time to go to bed, and they're still reading the book. Okay, time to wake up, and, and they wake up early, they're reading the book, and they're reading it at the breakfast table. Any book that has that kind of connection with a kid, to me, is important. And I just had not seen that with African-American protagonists to a large degree. And I always wanted to be that because, like, in my life, I had Fat Albert, but that was like 50 years ago, and there really hasn't been that kind of character to catapult to the level of a Fat Albert where it just crosses everything, all kinds of people. So I wanted it to be for African-American kids to see proudly. I wanted it to be for kids who weren't African-American to teach them how to be allies and kind of see like, oh, okay, there are different kinds of African-American people, kids, it's not always just the same narrative. I wanted it to be for parents, for teachers and faculty and librarians, people who interact with those African-American kids, to realize that, okay, so maybe 10-year-old Jerry Kraft doesn't like to read or only likes to read comics, but he can still grow up one day to make history and win a Newbery medal, as opposed to writing him off or, writing her off at that point. So I really just cast a really big net to try to bring as much empathy and awareness to kind of what it's like here.
No, that is really, really special. Folks, if you're just joining us, we are watching you are watching a conversation with Jerry Kraft, who is a #1 New York Times bestselling author, an illustrator. He'll be doing some live drawing in just a few minutes. Please tag your friends, tell them to join us. They can watch live or later. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. He is he's only the second person to win both the Coretta Scott King Award as well as the Newbery, the 5th African American to win that award, and the first graphic novelist to win the Newbery medal. Tell us about the way you're able to do your illustrations, how that affected your ability to tell your stories. Was there a time when you weren't sure whether you would be using the illustrations as such a key part of your story?
I have written prose books, I've done picture books, but I remember the first time I saw Smile by Raina Telgemeier, and that was kind of groundbreaking because, to think of a kid sitting down reading basically a 250-page comic book, graphic novel, was just amazing because, again, the Spider-Man books were 32 pages, of which probably, 5 of them were ads, but to see kids not only read it, but read it over and over and over again, or Gene Yang's American Born Chinese, which really gave me the confidence that I could really have an honest conversation with my readers and talk about things such as race and class and colorism and microaggressions, but do it in a way that I could still add a lot of humor and compassion and, family love and family bonding and, that kind of thing that I feel like a lot of the programs that I watched as a kid had, but I didn't see it quite as much anymore. But those are really things that I wanted to stick to. So the response has been absolutely overwhelming. And as a result, they were like, okay, we need you to do book 2. And we need it in a lot less time than it took you to create book 1. But there's so many cool things with doing a graphic novel, because when they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, I can really, there's a scene in New Kid where I have Jordan Banks walking into the cafeteria, and to show that he feels just kind of inadequate and small, I can literally draw him 6 inches tall while those giant feet of the, other kids just walk past him, and for so-called reluctant readers, or people that are more visual learners and visual thinkers, they can put it together. They can see the visuals and they can put the words together, and it just makes it easier. It stimulates different parts of their brain.
That's so amazing to hear that story and to understand how that all came together. I want to make sure that I just noticed your hat actually is the new kid on the hat.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and what's so funny? I turned and opened it up right to that page. Let me see if I can get that. So here is Jordan, and that is like first day in the cafeteria. And here's a milk carton, spilled milk carton. Don't cry over spilled milk, but it's here, it's there. And that's him, and just showing just how inadequate and small he feels. And that's one of the things that I don't even need words. I don't need for him to say, oh, this is how I feel. And he's sitting by himself in the cafeteria. So to comfort him, he takes out his sketchbook. And then once that happens, then, kids come over one by one and sit next to him, and he kind of, feels a little better. But that's stuff that you don't even need to have words with it. And that is kind of a pretty cool thing.
It really is. Folks, you're watching a conversation with Jerry Kraft. Please follow him on Twitter @Jerry Kraft. And I know he's had a chance to share this on his platforms as well. I hope you will share it too. Let's just take a look at what I call our global tour with people watching all over the world. And Jerry, I'll ask you for any memories of any of these places that they're watching from, or any of their comments. Jonathan Borstein's watching from the East Village, where he's watched 235 episodes in a row. Thanks, Jonathan, for being here. He's a great writer himself. So your favorite memory of downtown Manhattan?
The Village was a really huge part of, I would say, my young 20s, of going to places like Bella's Pizza and Steve's Ice Cream, where they would mix it. That was the first place where they'd put the ice cream on the counter and mix in whatever you wanted, anything from toasted coconut to M&Ms to Reese's Pieces. There's the basketball court on West 4th, the Waverly Theater, Dallas Barbecue. So that was probably one of my favorite kind of hangout places in Manhattan.
All right, you saw all those names just came right off without any prep, so that's very cool. Elizabeth Jacob says, good morning, Sree and Jerry. Also says vote on her icon, so that's great. Terry Ann Thompson is watching from Las Vegas, so very early, just past 6 a.m. when she wrote that message. What school in Riverdale did you attend, Jerry? And did you have a good art teacher?
I went to the Fieldston School, where I had taken the test for music and art and design. I got into both, and my parents were like, listen, the only term that they had ever heard associated with artists was starving artists. Like they were, bound forever. And I guess they were like, look, you are not going to be living in our basement until you're 50, So they sent me to Fieldston so I could get an education and get a real job. And, it was interesting there because Fieldston, I never took a cartooning class there, but the things that the kids were exposed to, from printmaking to silkscreen to life drawing with nude models in high school. It was like, wow. And just a lot of different things, woodworking. So it was really like a varied art career. And then, just kind of learning the interactions and meeting the people. So a lot of that went into me doing New Kid, as well as 4 years of going to Fieldston. And then
we should just say Fieldston's a very prestigious private school in Manhattan. We have this global audience who may not know. And and as you said, the private schools in New York are typically not very diverse, and so this was an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my two sons, we sent them to a private school in Connecticut. And so anything that I didn't experience myself that's in New Kid, I watched vicariously through them as they navigated that culture of that school. So I got to see it 4 years myself in Fieldston, and as a dad for like 12 years as my sons attended independent schools as well.
Had things changed in terms of accepting Black kids in these private schools between your time and your children?
You know, that's the first question that I'm going to have to take time to think about. Like, in a sense, but you know, like there's, depending on where you live, there's also pushback from the community as well of like, oh, you think you're all that because you're going to this big private school, or why do you talk like that? You know, why do you do this? Why do you do that? So there definitely is some pushback. And then, you know, I mean, sometimes the diversity is still the same as it was when I was in high school. And a lot of the same things of calling Black students by the wrong names and things like that are still, you know, I saw that as well as a kid and as a dad. So, yeah, I don't know if a lot has changed per se. You know, some things are better, but a lot of people still like, hey, this is good for me when I was a kid. So now that I'm an adult or I'm on the board, that worked for me. So why change things? You know, so I know some schools are listening more. And that to me has been, you know, when you talk about the things that have happened this year between the pandemic and, you know, Black Lives Matter, like a lot of schools, I have to say, are doing the work because they've had time to kind of regroup and see the big picture. So a lot of schools have used New Kid as a one book, one school read, where not only do they have the kids read it, but they also have the faculty read it. And then they opens up some tough conversations that people are afraid to have. You know, people aren't afraid to yell at each other about race, right? But they are still afraid to say, so Sree, what's it like for you when this happens? And then actually stop and listen to your response as opposed, oh, that doesn't happen. You're making that up, you know? And I feel like New Kid has encouraged lots and lots of conversations where people give honest answers. And it's been the highlight of my career.
That's so special, folks. If you're watching right now, please check out the book New Kid and the newer book Class Act, which just came out, the companion book. And you can find information about all of this on jerrycraft.com and check him out on Twitter as well. And he's on Facebook too. Let's look at some more of the comments that are coming in, and he'll be live drawing for us in a few minutes. Let's see. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. Any memories of the DC area you want to share?
Crab cakes. Going to ALA, I went to the 50th anniversary of the American Library Association. And it was so funny because I couldn't get a ticket for the ALA celebration. And a friend of mine, Andre Davis Pinkney, got me in. And then the next year, I actually won the Coretta Scott King Award. So I would have been the guest of honor had the pandemic not happened. So I had to give my speeches from home. But it's just so funny that one year, like, I couldn't even get in. And the next year, I'm the guest of honor. And that was pretty cool. And then there was a teacher who knew that I was coming there and kept tweeting, oh, wouldn't it be great if Jerry Kraft came to visit? Oh, wouldn't it be great? And I actually just went in and surprised and walked into the classroom, and tears started coming down her eyes. And kids got up, and literally every kid in the class lined up and gave me a hug one by one. So those are two of the Yeah, two of the big memories from that area.
Wow, that is very special. Arlene's watching from Columbia University. Melissa is saying congratulations, and Arlene says she remembers Fat Albert. Loved that cartoon when she used to watch it. And you have a viewer watching right now, Jerry, from Poland, from Warsaw.
Wow.
So we've got a global audience here. Let's see who else is watching. Sujana Chandrasekhar is watching. This Deshi child grew up reading Amar Chitrakatha comics. These are Indian comic books that are available in the US as well, and loved the graphic novel. And we should tell everybody that Sujana has her own terrific show that airs on Sunday. It's called She's on Call, and she and fellow surgeon Marina Kurian talk to doctors and others about various aspects of the current health situation, including COVID. And tomorrow they have an expert on bariatric surgery and sleep apnea. I know my wife will want me to watch that episode to understand more about that issue. Sundays at 11 a.m. at She's on Call. Everyone should check it out. And while we are at it, let's tell you about a show that runs right after this at 10 a.m. Eastern. Our friend Stefan Kaplan's show is called Spin It Social Hour, talking about photography and social media. And his guest is Bill Wadman, who's on Instagram at Bill Wadman. So we also gave Jerry a chance to catch his breath, and now we will come back to our conversation with Jerry Kraft. So one of the things that I'm so horrified about, and I hope the doctors will talk about tomorrow, Jerry, is that the president said that doctors are benefiting from inflating the COVID numbers. 1,000 healthcare workers have died in this crisis, and that's what he's choosing to highlight. Fake disinformation, misinformation coming right out of the White House. Just absolutely horrifying. Let's keep going here and see who else is with us.
Let me tell you one thing. So when I tried to get published early on, because I think there was still backlash because they were used to that single story narrative of what African American life is. And so I actually could not get published. So I had to self-publish my books. And I just want to show you, these are the books that I have self-published over about 20 years. I've done about 36 books. So for a lot of people who think, oh, he came out of nowhere, or he's an overnight sensation or overnight success, there's like 30 years of, doing books. Like when you talked about DC, of like illustrating a book for Dr. Courtney Davis called A is for Anacostia. So I have done picture books and, graphic novels and just all kinds of books over that 30-year span, because some of the rejection letters that I got were just so discouraging that I never thought that I would ever get traditionally published. I had literally given up, the idea of being traditionally published. And it wasn't until 2014 that I got the invitation by Scholastic to illustrate the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, that I really thought, oh, okay, maybe things are changing to the point where I can maybe get published again. So that's when I got a little bit more hope that, that was even a possibility for me.
Jerry, it's
like just regular people who wanted to be authors who also couldn't be published.
That's an amazing story, and a story of discouragement, but also of encouragement, where you pushed yourself, right?
Yeah.
And have 30 years of self-publishing and fighting for yourself and helping other people along the way. That's an amazing story in itself, that you have had to go through. Valerie says, love that he started as a self-published author. And Arlene says, just order Jerry's books and look forward to reading them and passing them on. So thank you, Arlene. Arlene's a great friend. And Melissa says, these stories are doing so much for so many. Thank you.
That's the teacher I surprised in DC, by the way.
Oh, that's great. And Melissa says, hashtag Brooklyn girl.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Jacobs is happy that you're from Harlem.
I know.
Melissa's watching from Arlington, Virginia, representing Hoffman Boston Elementary School. Alan says Jerry is the best, and I have to give a shout out to Alan Katz. Absolutely. He is an amazing author, children's book author himself, very funny gentleman who happens to be married to our producer, Rose Horowitz.
And he's got 4 new books out.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it. He's always churning out. The volume of books is amazing. And
in the time that we're having this interview, he just finished the 5th book.
So that is awesome. And thank you, Alan, for being here. Thank you for you and Rose for making this connection to Jerry, and for always supporting us too. And Stefan says, good morning. Hope all is well. Can't wait to watch this on replay. He has to prepare for his show. Wonderful weekend to everyone. Terry says, my son went to Fieldston. You're not a starving artist, and now you're a thriving artist. And Parag Patel says, hi, Jerry. I love your book. I saw a few pages of it on Google Books. So it says, you should be write countless books in the future. My blessings for you. So there you go. You should be writing more books. He says, and Arlene is tagging folks. Everybody do this. If you know someone right now who has, what is the age group you typically, Jerry, you aim at roughly?
So my publisher, HarperCollins for New Kid. Now for the new one is Harper Alley and Quiltree. I think they say like 8 to 12, but I mean, when I say I've gotten from 7 to 97, like it is really something that as an adult, you can also enjoy. And there's my friend Arlene Bascombe in Riverdale. Hi, Arlene. But yeah, it is something that, again, like a Shrek, I put enough jokes in there that will keep even older readers laughing, I hope.
Yeah, and that's where what works in some of these cartoons and in Pixar and others is these multi-level conversation, right? Where you have something that works with the younger set, but also works with the much older set as well. Yeah, so that's great to know that that's how you're working. Let's see some of these other comments. Very good fight, brother. Charles says, here's some more comments coming in. I got most of his books. Much love from Cincinnati. Do you want to say hi to Charles?
I absolutely do. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. That all those years of self-publishing, I couldn't have done it without people like you. So thank you.
And yeah, self-publishers need people to buy their books as well, and so that's important. Go ahead. You wanted to show us?
Yeah. So here is like one of the things for adults. So all of the chapter headings are like pop culture references. So instead of West Side Story, I have Upper West Side Story, where this is Jordan in the middle, and his friends around his block, and then tug of war with the kids from his private school. So that's something that an 8-year-old won't get a West Side Story. They're like, hey, isn't that the movie with Rita Moreno based on the Broadway play? But you know, adults will get that. So I have a lot of those kind of things that I put in specifically. So the school is called Riverdale Academy Day School. So this chapter heading here is Rad Men. And I actually did a takeoff on the Mad Men, one of the posters. So those are kind of the little Easter eggs that I put in for adults, and I'll do one more. So this is The Road to Riverdale, There and Back Again. And that is a Lord of the Rings reference. So the Road to Rivendell, There and Back Again. And there's actually a picture of Bilbo Baggins in this exact pose, who has a big staff like that.
Yes.
And I have Jordan with a lacrosse stick trying to figure it out. And instead of the Shire in the background, there's the road from Washington Heights to Riverdale. So a bunch of adult Easter eggs in there as well.
Nice. Nice. Melissa says you are a godsend. Daryl says I'm watching from Richmond Hill, where you can get the best roti in America. So he's throwing down on the food in Richmond Hill, which you may know is got lots of Indo-Caribbean.
I'm going to screenshot that because I love roti. So I just screenshotted that. All right, Daryl. I'm going to hold you to that.
Melissa says, my new class is reading Class Act. Teacher encouraged. Chitachi is a former guest on this show. Good morning, all. Chitachi is down in Florida. Thank you. And Chitachi, hope you and all your friends and everyone who you've ever met has already gone to vote. And I'm looking, Jerry, at your sweatshirt. What does it say?
Oh, it says Bronx Educator. One of the cool things about doing visiting so many schools is I get great swag. So this is one of the schools I went. It says Bronx Educator, and I will never have to buy another coffee mug again. I got one called a hat that says "It's Lit" from my friends at Project Lit. So they take good care of me.
I presume your day is when you're not working on your own drawing and writing is filled with these Zoom calls as you go from one school to another, and you've got this wonderful screen that serves as a cocoon for you, so we don't have to see behind you.
Right, that's my drawing table. You know what's so funny is I always kind of sit off to the side a little bit because when I sit right in the middle, people think I'm sitting on a throne. That's why I put the book in the background, because initially when I did it the first time, it was like, oh my goodness, it looks like a throne. Like, wow, that Newbery medal really went to his head. I'm like, oh man. So I put the books behind so it doesn't quite look like I've just, my ego just went. Psst.
I hear you. I'm going to stay small in order to make your throne look even bigger. Melissa says your books are for all ages. I love listening to my African American students explain some of their concepts to their non-African American peers. Amazing experience. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. Arlene says it's a great read for all. Parag says amazing graphics. Chitachi says love this. My sister actually lives in Riverdale.
Oh, cool.
Which is cool. All right, so we promised some live drawing. Yep. So we'd love to see, and if you can explain how you're planning to do that. And Chitachi says, "LOL, the real Game of Thrones."
Oh, very funny. Yep. Absolutely. So I did both books on my Wacom Intuos Pro. And so there's a little learning curve, right? Because here is my my stylus. Mm-hmm. And so unlike drawing on paper where I'd actually be looking at this drawing, I am not looking at this at all, but I'm looking at the screen, right? So I'm drawing in Adobe Photoshop, and let me share my screen. And so this would be in Photoshop how I did both books. So I have let's get right. So because when I drew in pencil, I used to draw in non-photo blue pencil first. And then once I had that, I would go over it in marker or ink or whatever. So I still kind of do the same thing, because I'm just comfortable with that. So I would start out lighter like this and just get kind of the form of it. And I'm not really putting in any details until the last minute, right? So here is my rectangle, which will be the body. There's the head. And this is actually going to be a book. So just 3 swipes like that. I'm going to bring the arm down, and this is going to be a hand. So in my mind, I'm doing things that my brain is like, oh, that's easy. Yeah, I can do a rectangle. Oh, I can do a triangle, and I can do another rectangle, and I can do this shape. So there's nothing that, my brain is like, oh, I can't do that. That's too rough. And then once I get this much done, then I can go in and say, okay, let's put the eyes. We're going to go here. Let's give a nose. Let's do this. And then now it's almost like molding with clay. I can bring this in, and let's have the hair going like that. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He's pretty symmetrical. For his new school, Riverdale Academy Day School, he has to wear a collared shirt, but his favorite article of clothing is his hoodie. And now you see that it is actually coming to life, you know. So it started with just a bunch of like, you know, little shapes, rectangles and squares and things like that. And I just keep going over it and over it. And then what I would do is do a new layer, and then I would go in black. And now I'll take my time once I have this, and I'll go in and let's make it a little thicker. And let's go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And then let's get this. And one of the good things is just the undo if I don't like it, you know, and that's something that obviously, you know, I used thousands of jars of whiteout when I was younger before being able to undo. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And then this is cool because now I can go with my paint bucket tool and just fill that in, you know, and that is a time saver. And let's get that. Let's get that. And then slowly going in and filling in stuff like shadows. So I'll put a little bit of a shadow under his neck. And so I got a prompt from Rose. She said that I better talk about the Spring Hill thing that I mentioned. So do you want me to multitask and talk about
why don't we finish that and we'll talk about that in just a second. This is so interesting to see this. Obviously, when you were growing up, you were not using computers to draw, you were sketching. What have you lost and what have you gained in using the Wacom and the other ways in which you're drawing now?
So what I have gained is I can be a lot more experimental, you know, because I can see things and know that I can always undo it, you know, so that I can try something and know that if I mess up, it's not 14 hours of work down the drain. You know, I can go in and I don't have to like take a new photostat or take a new this or, you know, all the old school supplies that I used to use, like, oh, cut a new Ruby leaf and do it this, do it that. You know, I can just really go in and say, oh, you know what, I don't like that. I'm going to move it. You know, I can come in like that. So now watch how I do this hand. This is a triangle, and that will be the index finger. That will be the thumb. And his mechanical pencil will go right in there. And now once I have this, I can go with my paint bucket tool. And this is where the time saving comes from. You know, just click, 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 you know. And if I don't like it, again, back in the day, if I had done this and been like, oh, let's give him a green shirt, you know, green hoodie, and I realized I did not want that, I would have had to do the whole thing over again. You know, so I can say, I don't want that one blue, and I can experiment and see how this looks. I can go in and see how that looks.
Wow.
And now, so here's where I can really, you know, if I decide that I wanted to give him a little bit more character, I can actually lasso the head. And now I can say, you know what, let me have him tilted for a little bit more personality, you know, and I can come in and do something like that. And again, I would have been locked into the stiffer version if I hadn't done, you know, if I wasn't drawing it digitally. So I'm not afraid to make mistakes at all because I can just always undo it if I need be.
Sure. Look at that. I think where so many of us are learning how you're able to do this. And now those blue originals, the sketch lines, what happens to those?
And just take them out like that. On a different layer.
Nice.
And so let's put this over it and then just put that on top. So it's as if it never happened. And then what I can do is I can go in and really add some form to him, because I can do the shading. So my good buddies, Machindo Kumba and Eric Velasquez, they would beat me down for hours at a time until I learned how to do proper shading and light sourcing and stuff like that, which I greatly appreciate. And I'm still not afraid to learn new things, which is why I think even on Class Act, it is a better book even than New Kid, because I'm still allowing myself to learn and take, positive feedback.
Sure. This is spectacular. Thank you so much. We talked about what you gained from moving to the digital side. What did you lose?
I don't really feel as if I have lost anything. I don't want kids to always feel like they have to emulate, and then, Mom, I can't, draw on the pad now. Mr. Kraft says I need a $600 Wacom tablet and an Adobe membership. So I still draw, and I'll actually show you that I did Class Act on paper on a loose leaf binder, because it's hard for me to throw out papers and stuff like that. So I use one of my son's old, things I bought them from school that they're like, yeah, I don't need this, Dad. I'll throw it out. I'm like, no, dude, that could still work. So, one of their old back to school things from probably like the 7th grade is now like what I use to make a historic book, which is actually kind of funny.
No, that's great. Look at all these great comments. Melissa says amazing. Chitachi says very interesting indeed. We do have one complaint though. Alan Katz says, I thought live drawing meant there was going to be a giveaway. And where is my prize? He says, good catch there, Alan. So great to see all these comments coming in. Our surgeon friend Sujana says, this is like us surgeons learning how to go from looking down, operating directly through a microscope to now looking up at the screen while we operate through endoscopes. So wow. There's a different way in which professions evolve as they use more digital technology.
Yeah, and, exactly. In the time that I mentioned Alan Katz last, he just did his 6th new book of the
and Terry says, wow. And we can see the impact of the shading and why that's so important in what we're...
Yeah, just because it's cartooning doesn't mean I don't learn real things like anatomy and shading and, things like that. In fact, a few years ago, I went to Paris with my buddy Eric Velasquez and a couple other illustrators, and I learned so much appreciation for the masters that I didn't learn necessarily in art school, because I felt then that it was kind of forced down my throat, and I didn't understand that someone like Picasso, that was a choice. I was like, hey, I could do that. What is that? It's just like a bunch of scribbles. So I probably got more of a appreciation of seeing that a lot of these things were actual choices that they made to really improve their art, as opposed to just like, throwing paint on the canvas and rolling around, and it's like, hey, now put that in the museum.
Yeah, exactly. Here is Melissa saying, lit surgeon, taking the comment from Dr. Chandrasekhar and connecting that. And Daryl's offered you his phone number to come out to Richmond Hill and introduce you to the best tasting food you've ever had, Jerry. So that's a very serious offer there. It's just so great to see what you're doing, and we're seeing creativity in real life. How are you feeling about Tuesday?
What's so, it's not that I don't think about it, right? But it is very difficult to be quarantined and your job is to write kids' books that make people laugh, so I really don't know. It's been such a weird, polarizing time. I've never seen so many times where people can't actually have a conversation anymore, you know. And I pray it gets better. But like I said, there are definitely times where I have to, in order to make books for kids, that I have to kind of turn off the TV for a while, you know, and just like, you know, put something mindless on. You know, I'm going to finish watching The Haunting of Blair Manor or something like that, you know.
No, wow, look at this. This is so well done. And we're so grateful to you for sharing this. Valerie says, this is fascinating. Thanks for sharing your studio session. And this comes out so well when we're seeing, and you're obviously talking to us at the same time while doing this. So you're multitasking and even spelling my name right. I love that. Thank you. Wow.
That's one of the things in New Kid. You take the time to listen and you make sure little details of spelling someone's name right.
That is amazing. Yeah, I want to see if we can get a nice full shot of that. If you can remove the palettes and things like that,
okay.
That's amazing.
All right, let me close this up. Close that up.
That's beautiful. I'm so touched. Thank you very much for sharing this and making this and doing this live with us. I know so many of us have learned a lot. And look at these are the images from the book.
Yeah, and, class act. And I show that I do 2 panels at a time. I go and I put all the words. I actually turn my handwriting into a font so I can type and it looks like it's hand lettered. It kind of is because it is my handwriting, but it's a font, which is also very helpful because when it gets translated into different languages, like now it's in Korean and Greek and Japanese and Chinese and Albanian and Romanian, to name a few. And then I'll go in and put in the backgrounds. And then my friend who I was telling you about, Mashindo Koumba, comes in and pops in the really amazing details and backgrounds. And, you know, I can take characters like this guy here if I decide I want to put him over here, you know. So there's just so much that I'm able to do to not, you know, I can really cut this by half as opposed to, you know, if I was drawing by paper and then having to scan it.
And yeah, that's amazing. Tell us, for those who've just joined us very quickly, tell us a little bit about Jordan.
So Jordan is this one right here, and he is 12 years old in book 1. All his other friends are 13. He's African-American, but he's light-skinned and always seen kind of as non-threatening. His friend Drew, who is more the focus on book 2, is he taller, dark-skinned, you know, he wears his hair in twist. And it's really the difference of how they are perceived, where Jordan is always more threatening. Drew is always kind of seen as a threat because of, you know, his physical size and attributes. Liam is one of their friends who is very wealthy, comes from a wealthy family. And I wanted to have it where a little different, you know, where like when I was a kid, whenever there was, you know, a wealthy kid in the movie, it was always played by James Spader. And he was just a horrible, horrible human being. You know, like someone like Anthony Michael Hall would come and he'd be the nicest kid in the world. And you would see James Spader all of a sudden drive up in his Corvette with his sweater tied around his neck and just slap the ice cream out of his hand. You know, so I didn't want to do any stereotypes. So even for someone like Liam coming from a wealthy family, I have him where he's almost embarrassed by his family's wealth, because I hadn't really seen that delved into a lot in characters, and just how these 3 kids of totally different backgrounds really bond and become friends.
That's great to know about this. As we're at the hour, and we're so grateful that you spend time with us. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Valerie says, thanks for drawing the direct connection between reading books and developing empathy and understanding of others. That's beautifully put. Chitachi says, this is so great. Terry Ann Thompson was very impressed that you made your own font.
Yep.
And so many other comments coming in. Can I ask you one thing that we have learned as trying to be allies of the Black community during this summer and fall is the importance of the talk. That means something different in the Black community than it does with those of us. You know, my twins are 17 in New York, and when we say the talk, it means something different. It means about drugs and sex and things like that, as opposed to that's a talk you need to have, of course, but the talk is something else. And as a father of two young boys, not so young anymore,
Right.
What have you had a chance to reflect on? Kind of the awareness that has happened this summer. You know, the tragedy of George Floyd's killing has resulted in much more awareness of so many things, everything from Juneteenth to the talk to the real pain that African Americans go through every day for things that the rest of us take for granted.
Yeah. Boy, that's another hour conversation right there. But I just want to give some examples. So, for example, my oldest son, when he was going to his prom, he wanted to borrow his mom's car. His mom has a nice Mercedes, right? And I'm thinking, I was like, you know what? I said, listen, I understand you'd love to show off with your friends and driving in style, but you know, I picture him coming home on the Merritt Parkway at 2:00 in the morning, playing music with his friends in the Mercedes and getting pulled over because why is this young Black man in the Mercedes? So although he was upset that, you know, he had to borrow my car, which is like a 1973 AMC Pacer. I mean, not really, but that kind
Might
of
as well have been.
Right, might as well have been like, oh, you got to borrow the family Studebaker, you know, just crank it up and go. But my job as his dad is to make sure that he comes home. You know, even as a Newbery winning author, I get pulled over at least once a year. One of the last times is because the light over my license plate had gone out. And so I got stopped for that, which I never knew that there was a light bulb over your license plate. So if you're watching, check your light bulb over your license plate. Police officers who said that they followed me for 5 miles and I didn't use my turn signal. Like, well, why did you follow me for 5 miles? You know, and I'm on a 1-lane highway. So how could I have used my turn signal 3 times? So there is that, you know, and a few things I just want to say. So when you hear like Black Lives Matter, you know, I would love for people to think of it in the same vein as if someone said like, you know, let's fight breast cancer, you know, let's cure breast cancer. That doesn't mean that you don't care about people with leukemia. You know, if you say save the dolphin, that doesn't mean kill all the whales, you know. So if someone says, hey, save the dolphins, I'm like, well, what about the whales? You know, it just means that in this particular case, like saving the black rhinos, you know, they are hunted because there is so much money for their ivory and their tusk. That doesn't mean that their life is more valuable than a hummingbird, but hummingbirds aren't hunted in that same way. So through my work and through conversations like this, I just like to be the friend that just kind of gently puts their arm around your shoulder with permission, of course, you know, and says, listen, this is what it's like. So you may not be as afraid for your son to drive a nice car at midnight as I am, you know, for my son. And if I am paying the same taxes and paying the same this and paying, like, I should not have these same fears, you know? And so those are the kind of things that even I was in Stanford, and I actually did the takeoff of this in class act. I was in Stanford driving and I stopped at a light and the police officer says, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to get rid of that. And I immediately panic, like sweat's coming down. I'm thinking I got to bolt out the window and just leave the car and run. And I'm like, what? And he goes, Doge. And I had on New York Giants gloves, and like they had just traded like Odell Beckham. So he was mad, So he's like, oh yeah, the Giants, they're not going to win another game this season. I'm so disappointed. I'm like, you can't joke with me like that. Thank you. And I'm relieved. But, like whether or not the situation is real, the fear is real, and I should want to have and be allowed to have the same, like telling myself, look, if you're in trouble, look for a police officer. If you're this, do this. But you always have to have so many different scenarios and different things like that. So that's what the talk means to me.
No, thank you for that. Chitachi was a guest on my show when we said on July 4th, and she talked about what it's like to be African American and be American and what that means. And she says it's tiring that we have to continuously explain this to people. And lots of other questions and comments coming in here. Melissa says, harder still to justify to your adult children. Alnita says, Jerry, it's so cool to see your process. People often don't realize that things come together through trying until you pull all the right things together. You're adding things and taking them away until they come together in that way is encouraging and just so important. Melissa says, harder still to justify to your young adult sons. Yeah. And we are, I think we're all learning together in this. May I ask a question from ignorance that comes from what is the role that colorism has played? You're being lighter skin yourself. How has that affected your life and your storytelling?
Well, it would not be fair for me to say that it has not come with advantages. It's like being a male in corporate America, that saying that being male does not give you certain advantages over being female, pay scale and raises and things like that. So again, in the same way that I try to be aware of that, I know that, I've had friends that are taller with afros and darker complexion that get treated much differently, and I know, even though my son is basically a little darker than me, but he had bought a shirt, a jersey from a local sporting goods store, and he never wore it. And one day he's like, "Oh, I'm going to wear this," and he went on and he put it on, and it still had the security tag on it. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to go back and have him turn it off." I'm like, "Wait a minute, you can't go by yourself." So I stop what I'm doing because I'm like, they're going to think you stole it. So I go in, and even with, his dad, they were still like, how did you get this? I'm like, look, we have a rewards card. Pull up the receipt, and mumbling the whole time, like, next time have the receipt. And I know that they thought that we stole it. And that's just something else that is always in there. But, like younger African-American kids, with dark skin and twist or dreads or locks or whatever, I think a lot of teachers feel like you have to talk to them more sternly because there's no discipline at home, because they picture a single parent household where there's no discipline or there's no this or there's no that. And it's like, listen, you forget that these are still kids, kids are kids, and again, the books, I have in New Kid, where the librarian gives a white kid the magic of the magical magicon, a magical adventure, which is like a Harry Potter type book. And she gives the black kids the mean streets of South Uptown, a gritty urban tale of the grit of today's urban grittiness. Because like, why do all our stories have to be gritty? Like, why can't we have Harry Potter? That kind of thing. And those are things that sometimes subtly and then not so subtly I try to point out in my work, to just have people go, wow, there aren't any Black Harry Potters, like not a superhero like Black Panther, Miles Morales, but just like a Greg Heffley or a, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I've dedicated my life to do.
Well, thank you. And I want to just point out this story that Rose has sent us that connects you and LeBron James's production company. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so the Spring Hill Company, which is with LeBron James and Maverick Carter, signed a first look deal with Universal Pictures, and they are bringing them 3 properties. And one of the first is a live action New Kid movie. So we are in the process of getting a director who so far we really like, and they really like us. And now we're getting writers and kind of building the whole thing. And I will be an executive producer of the picture, and I just can't wait. And I have the utmost respect, even as a Knicks fan. I have the utmost respect for LeBron, and just really couldn't think of a better fit than Spring Hill and Universal Pictures. So I am really looking forward to it.
That is awesome. How did you decide live action versus the graphic novel, like an animated version?
You know, we went back and forth a lot, and I think having a realistic portrayal, but still having to be able to add like some animated elements to it might make it seem realistic, but also more magical in that kind of sense. Because I've seen both work really well. Like Into the Spider-Verse was absolutely amazing. Yeah. One of my favorite animated movies, favorite movies ever, you know. And then, but you see something like Black Panther, which is live action, so maybe a combination of the two or something. But we're all kind of working it out, and you know, when the director comes on board, we'll let them add their own creative magic touch. But they are really big fans of the book, and you know, I can't wait. But it's been a great ride for this whole overnight success.
30, for those of you who missed it, he said it took him 30 years of self-publishing in order to do this. We've heard other stories like that. You mentioned Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, setting aside her current crises. She was rejected, I believe 37 different publishing houses rejected her. She was living in her car, and before she had her success. By the way, I'm just seeing on this website on Variety, Sean Connery has died at the age of 90. Do you want to share a memory of Mr. Connery?
I mean, the James from the James Bond movies, he was, I think, the first Bond that I knew. To, you know, being Indiana Jones's dad, you know, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you know, the James Patterson movies. I mean, just really kind of an icon that I remember as a kid. And but yeah, definitely as a very classy Bond, James.
Yeah. James Bond. And they say who you see first as a James Bond really becomes the most important Bond in your life. And so you saw him first. There are others who saw Roger Moore first and then kind of associate him more.
Sorry for those that saw Timothy Dalton first. You kind of missed out a little bit.
Yeah, well, we don't want to start a whole James Bond battle here, but of course, Sean Connery, iconic actor, lived till 90, and we're thinking of him. Let's see some of the comments coming in. Chitachi says, congratulations, there's wonderful news about your movie deal. And Melissa says, I'm so excited for you, I can hardly wait. Alnita says, woohoo, heartiest congratulations on this amazing deal. Another 30-year overnight success, says Alnita. And one thing that I will say, I'm really happy that to hear you're going to have an executive producer credit means you left some control, not a lot, but at least better than many authors who have complained very much about what has happened to their stories when they turn into books, when they turn into movies, including some very famous authors, very successful authors who were very disappointed because they had no say. Once you collect that check,
we've had really good conversations so far, and Spring Hill really loved it. And the director that we're talking to, his kids had read the book before he read it. and they're like, Dad, we have to do this movie. So I know his kids are going to hold him accountable. So, it's not me that he's going to have to answer to, it's his kids. And I'm like, got it.
Super fans, when the children are super fans, that will help you.
Absolutely.
I totally get that. Look at the time. It's already an hour and 15 minutes. It's been an incredible hour for me. Thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your thoughts and your creative process with people all over the world who watched and learned. And for those who just joined us, this is going to start instantly as soon as we're done on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So please tag friends, with children, without children, anybody who should know about this creative process and the story. You see the books behind him. New Kid is the older book. The newer book is called Class Act. Jerry is only the 5th African American to win the Newbery Medal, the first graphic novelist to win the Newbery Medal, and only the 2nd person to win the Coretta Scott King and the Newbery Medal for the same book in the history of these awards. Please check out his website, jerrycraft.com. Oh, there it is. Can you read a little bit of the words there so that people understand?
Coretta Scott King Book Award. This award commemorates life, works, and dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and honors Mrs. Coretta Scott King, presented to Jerry Kraft, author of New Kid 2020.
And Chitachi says, thanks so much, Sree and Jerry. And Melissa is also applauding. And a different Melissa says, good things come to those who are persistent. You and LeBron are 2 of my faves. Wow. Looking forward to
a lot for each other.
Looking forward to your collaboration. All the best. LeBron, of course, because of his talent and because he's in a different industry, was the chosen one. From about the age of 13 or 14, people knew he was going places. Our friend Jerry had to wait a little longer, but here he is in the same sentence as LeBron James, and that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Great teamwork. And Alnita says, keep winning. My heart is pounding. Such an honor.
Thank you.
That's a great note on which to end this conversation, folks. Our guest has been Jerry Kraft. Please check him out on Twitter, follow him, and also check out jerrycraft.com. Get those books for the younger people in your life, or the adults, as he said, because there are many levels and layers there. And his website, if you're a teacher, you're a librarian, his website has information on how to book him for Zoom calls with your students. And Valerie says, thanks for this work and conversation. And thank you if you're watching for the first time. We're on every single day. This series on my daily global show. Tomorrow, 9 p.m., positivity is what we're at. I'm going to give Jerry a moment to give us a final thought before we let him go. And before that, I'm just going to tell him what's coming up on the work that we are doing. And we'll just give him a moment to think of his final thoughts. So a reminder that on weekends are busy around here at Digimentors. I have my WBAI call-in show from noon to 2 Eastern. Today we're talking to a chief of psychology and mental health expert. Dr. Stuart Shankman's going to be with us. How to get through till Tuesday and beyond. And then in the 1 o'clock hour, professor from Hunter College History Department, Manu Bhagwan, who is a friend and an inspiring speaker. You will be hearing from him. He came to eulogize John Lewis when he passed away on a Saturday morning. He came on our show and was brilliant. And then tomorrow morning is Sunday, is a New York Times read along, and the 5th anniversary of reading the print edition of the New York Times out loud. And our guest is longtime New York Times editor Jim Roberts, the former editor-in-chief of Cheddar, and the publisher and chief strategy officer at the 74, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday. And then followed that by She's on Call on Facebook and Twitter. Please check out She's on Call with our friends and surgeons, Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina. And then 9 p.m. Eastern is our every episode of the Sunday edition of the Global Daily Show. So over to Jerry for a final thought, and then we'll say goodbye.
I want to start by thanking you and Rose and Alan Katz, who just released his 7th book of the month. The people at HarperCollins, Andrew Harwell and Rosemary Brosnan, and the whole team, my agent Judy Hansen. And graphic novels are real books. They are real reading. And I think that there really are no reluctant readers. They're just kids who haven't found that book yet. So try to match that kid with the book. And, I missed out on a lot by not reading as I was younger. So I made up as I got older, and I made sure that both of my sons were readers. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the support. It's been absolutely amazing. And I am currently working on book 3. So there will be another in the New Kids series. So
fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to hit end broadcast so that this starts up right again. Please tag your friends. Tell them to watch this episode and to check out jerrycraft.com and @jerrycraft. Thanks very much.